Hi friends, I want to tell you a story today that has surprises and feelings. I hope you like it and want to keep reading. Ready? Let's start. Mary woke up in her small apartment just outside New York City. She was annoyed by the noise of her alarm clock. She got ready to catch the train to work and ate her usual simple breakfast. To her family, her job as a clerk at an insurance company seemed normal and not special. She didn't make much money either. But there was a secret no one knew. Mary had a popular YouTube channel called Healing Hearts. On it, she helped people who had been hurt emotionally. Many people watched her videos and felt better because of her words. But her family didn't know about this. Her father, Charles, was a rich man who built houses and neighborhoods upstate in New York. His company, Wilson Estates, was well known and respected. Charles was very strict and always wanted everything to be perfect. Since Mary was a child, he set high rules for her and often criticized her when she didn't do well. Mary's mother, Lisa, had been a model when she was young. Even now, she looked elegant and was important in their town, but she was also cold inside. She wanted her daughters to be very successful. When Mary cared more about helping others than getting good grades, Lisa said she was wasting her chances. Mary's younger sister, Jessica, worked as the public relations director for their father's company. She lived the life the family wanted. She went to a top university, worked for their father's company, and was about to marry Paul Anderson, whose family was also very important in the town. The relationship between Jessica and Mary was complicated. The younger sister had always been her parents' favorite and looked down on her older sister as a failure. Mary picked up her cell phone and checked a message from her sister about the wedding invitation. She let out a long sigh. 2 years ago, she had ended her 5-year marriage to David. Her family believed she had been abandoned because she was infertile, and they repeatedly blamed her for this perceived flaw. "You still haven't replied," Jessica's message read. "I hope you're not planning to ruin my special day. Don't talk about your miserable divorce in front of everyone. Paul's family is refined." Mary finished reading the message and gave a dark smile. She moved to the window and looked at the certificates and plaques arranged on her living room wall. Through her online activities, she had built a reputation as an advocate for survivors of emotional abuse and had even established a non-profit organization. However, she had never told her family about this. At a small desk in the corner of the room, she continued her work in silence. She wrote a reply to the wedding reception invitation. "Of course I'll attend," she wrote. "I'm also making special preparations for the family." Mary picked up her smartphone and opened a special app. The screen displayed the words Healing Hearts Live, with the status ready underneath. She took a deep breath. Behind her decision to attend her sister's wedding reception was a plan. Her family believed her ex-husband David was a dropout who was still struggling. In reality, David had become the executive of a successful technology company. The real reason for their divorce was completely different from what her family assumed. Mary opened her closet and took out a modest navy blue dress. This would be her weapon. It was inconspicuous, wouldn't draw attention, but was the perfect attire to unleash the truth. Hidden in her smartphone was a reality she had kept from her family. Her YouTube channel, Healing Hearts, now had over 1 million supporters, and her non-profit organization supporting victims of emotional abuse was thriving. For 2 years, she had been collecting evidence for this day. She had also made legal preparations. Mary checked her cell phone one last time and confirmed an email from her lawyer. She nodded slightly at the message that read, "All preparations are complete. I won't run away anymore," she quietly told herself. It's time to reveal the truth. The ballroom of the Grand Palace, a luxury hotel in Westchester County, was lavishly decorated for Jessica and Paul's wedding reception. Crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, and white and gold flowers adorned each table. Local dignitaries had gathered to celebrate the union of the Wilson and Anderson families. Mary paused at the entrance to the venue. She had chosen the navy blue dress specifically to blend in among the flashy outfits. Checking her smartphone, she took a quiet, deep breath. "You finally came." Turning around, Mary saw Lisa standing there in perfect makeup and an expensive champagne gold dress. She looked her daughter up and down, frowning slightly. "You could have dressed up a bit more," she said. "This is a special day. Everyone is watching." Mary gave a gentle smile. "Where's Jessica?" "At the head table. Of course, You're at table 8 with the relatives, Lisa said, then disappeared into the crowd. Mary headed to her assigned seat. At the table sat distant relatives and employees of her father's company. She greeted them quietly and took a sip of water. The voice of the reception's MC echoed throughout the venue. Jessica and Paul appeared on the dance floor and began dancing to a sweet Ed Sheeran tune. Jessica's pure white wedding dress was adorned with beads that reflected light with every move. Paul gazed at her lovingly. Mary observed quietly. In her hand, her smartphone vibrated slightly. A message appeared, ready. After the dance, food was served and champagne glasses were filled. Then came time for the speeches. Charles Wilson stood up first. We are honored to welcome the Anderson family, he began. His speech was short and not sentimental, but there was obvious pride in his voice. My daughter Jessica has always been our pride. She has the talent and beauty that does justice to the Wilson name. Mary picked up her wine glass and took a sip. Her eyes slowly scanned the room, settling on the projector and screen that had been set up. Lisa's speech centered on herself and her own youthful beauty. Jessica has inherited my beauty, she said. The audience laughed politely. Then Jessica stood up. She looked around at the audience with a sparkling smile. Today is the happiest day of my life, she said. I want to thank everyone who supported me, especially my parents. Thank you for showing me the perfect model of life. She glanced once in Mary's direction, curling her lips slightly. And I've prepared a special presentation, Jessica continued. A slideshow of family memories began. The venue lights dimmed, and the screen brightened. The first few slides were photos of Jessica from childhood to the present, beautiful, successful, always surrounded by her parents. Then, her voice cut through the room. And let me share a little about my sister, Mary. The screen changed. In large letters, it displayed, Mary, infertile, failed marriage, high school dropout, low income, single. Giggles arose from the venue, gradually turning into loud laughter. Mary's photo was projected on the screen. Mary didn't move, her expression didn't change, but internally, she thought, it's begun. Jessica seemed to be enjoying the audience's reaction. Don't laugh too much, she'll cry, she joked. The venue erupted in even louder laughter. Lisa took a sip of wine, staring ahead expressionlessly, but there was a faint light of pleasure in her eyes. Charles chuckled and whispered to Paul's father sitting next to him. Just a joke, right? Mary slowly stood up. The laughter continued, but gradually subsided as people noticed her standing. May I say a few words too? She asked in a quiet voice. Jessica looked confused. This wasn't part of the plan. Of course, but please keep it short. Mary took out her smartphone. Let it begin, she said. She tapped something on the screen. Suddenly, the venue screen changed. It now displayed the words, Healing Hearts Live, the reality of emotional abuse by family. A viewer counter appeared. The number rapidly increased, exceeding 1 million. The venue fell silent. At the same time, a chat box appeared in the corner of the screen, with messages streaming in. One stood out particularly, a message from David. The evidence is gathered. The legal team is standing by. You are not alone anymore. Mary smiled gently. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Let me tell you a little about what I know about the Wilson family. Jessica turned pale and looked toward her parents. Lisa dropped her glass. Charles half rose from his chair. What are you trying to do? He asked in a low voice. Just telling the truth, Mary answered. The truth everyone has been wanting to hear. Her hands weren't trembling. Her eyes were filled with firm determination. She was finally about to unleash the voice that had been suppressed for years. In that moment, she knew she wasn't the family's failure. She had become the voice of 1 million people. The smartphone screen continued to show the live broadcast. Comments kept increasing. Silence dominated the room. Mary stood in the center of the venue, her back straight. Her voice was calm, but her words were ice cold. Hello to the 1 million people watching this moment live. I am Mary. Today, I break my silence. Jessica half rose then shouted. What kind of joke is this? Stop it right now. Mary stared at her sister. A joke? You like jokes, Jessica, especially when they're about me. She tapped the screen of her smartphone and pressed a button. Audio began to play through the venue speakers. "Hey Mom, why can't Mary have children?" Jessica's voice. "Her body is broken, just like her life." Lisa's cold laugh. "David was right to abandon her. Men want to leave descendants. Mary can't do anything." Gasps spread through the audience. Some looked away, others stared in shock. As the recorded conversation continued, Mary directed the camera at the audience, zooming in on Charles, Lisa, and Jessica's faces. All three had turned pale. Paul wore a confused expression and had moved his chair slightly away from his fiancée. "This is what I recorded at a family Christmas gathering," Mary explained. "A conversation when I stepped away. But there's more." In the next recording, Charles's voice resonated clearly. "Mary is a failure. Jessica is my real daughter. Mary was just a mistake." Lisa stood up and shouted, "Stop it. This is eavesdropping. It's illegal." Mary calmly replied, "No, Mother. In New York State, recording is legal if one participant in the conversation consents." She met Lisa's eyes. "I consented, and for the abuse I received directly, I am my own witness." Then she began playing another video from her smartphone. It showed 16-year-old Mary returning home from a piano concert, happily reporting, "I got second place." "You mean you lost?" Charles said. "The Wilsons are never second. It's either first or nothing." The smile disappeared from young Mary's face. "Second out of 25, Dad." "Loser," he muttered, leaving the room. The atmosphere in the venue began to shift. Uncomfortable whispers stirred among the guests. Many looked ill at ease. Paul's parents were visibly disturbed, whispering to each other with furrowed brows. Mary continued, "Throughout my life, I've experienced thousands of such moments. I've constantly been called a loser, defective, a disgrace." She paused, her voice steady. "But the most cruel was the mockery about my infertility and divorce." She looked up at the screen. "To all viewers, many of you have had similar experiences. Emotional abuse from family is difficult to see, and harder to prove. That's why I launched Healing Hearts, to collect the voices of survivors and build a community to support them." At these words, Charles suddenly stood up. "What nonsense, you've always just tried to seek attention. You're ruining Jessica's special day." Mary quietly laughed. "Dad, I have 1 million followers on YouTube. My book will be published next month. I run a nationwide non-profit organization. If I wanted attention, I would have had it long ago." The venue fell silent. Surprise rippled across Charles and Lisa's faces. They had known nothing about their daughter's success. "You thought I was a low-wage clerk with a failed marriage and a defective woman who couldn't have children," Mary said. "That's because I let you think so, because I knew, if you knew about my success, you would try to ruin it." Her voice grew stronger. "And what you know about David is also wrong." At that moment, the doors to the venue opened. A tall, confident man entered. It was David Clark. The once awkward young man had transformed into a sophisticated businessman. He walked straight toward Mary. A murmur arose from the guests. Lisa sank into her chair. Charles blushed. David stood beside Mary and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mary," he said, "I didn't divorce you because you were infertile. I couldn't bear your family's abuse anymore, but that was my weakness. I'm sorry I left you alone," David said, his voice steady. He looked around the venue. "I am now the liberation of breaking years of silence, of finally speaking the truth." She took a deep breath. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "For a long time, I was made to believe I was worthless, but today, I reclaim my worth. And I send a message to all those in similar situations: you are not alone. Your voice has power, and it's never too late to speak the truth." David smiled beside her. The guilt he once carried now transformed into pride in her strength. Charles and Lisa sat speechless. Their perfect facade had crumbled, crushed under the weight of truth. The venue was quiet, but online, a storm was raging. Mary's brave stand had ignited hearts across the digital world. As the chaos settled, Charles finally stood up. His face was red with anger, veins bulging at his temples. "This is completely inappropriate," he barked. "Mary, you always want attention, always playing the victim, All of this is just exaggeration. No one in this family has ever hurt you. Mary turned to him, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Really? She asked. Then what is this? She tapped her smartphone. A new recording played. It was the voice of 13-year-old Mary. You're just stupid. Why can't you be like Jessica? Charles's voice bellowed from the speakers. She's only 11, but already much smarter than you. You're a disgrace, Mary, a disgrace to the Wilson family. When the recording ended, Charles was speechless. Lisa stood up, trying to smooth over the situation. This is taken out of context. Charles was just being strict for Mary's own good. We loved her. We were just trying to toughen her up. Mary quietly shook her head. Love, when was the last time you hugged me? When did you ever celebrate my success? She pointed at the screen. Look, my channel helps millions of people. I've written books, given lectures, established a non-profit organization. But you never once said you were proud of me, because you didn't even know about my success. The atmosphere in the venue began to shift. Many guests expressed discomfort. Some got up to leave. Paul's parents, in particular, looked visibly upset. Paul's father stood abruptly. What kind of farce is this? Is this the family we were trying to connect with? Charles hurriedly tried to approach him, but he waved Charles away. No thanks. I don't want to be involved in your family issues. Mary, maintaining her composure, spoke her next words clearly. Everyone, this is not a farce. This is the truth, and I have legal measures prepared as well, a lawsuit for emotional abuse. She pointed at her smartphone screen, which displayed an email from a law firm. I've been collecting evidence for 2 years. My lawyers say I have enough. Preparations for a damages lawsuit for emotional abuse are complete. At these words, the color drained from Charles's face. As a real estate developer, he understood exactly what impact such a public scandal would have on his business. Mary, we're family, he suddenly said, his tone softening. Family matters should be resolved within the family. Mary smiled. Now you bring up the importance of family. She continued the live broadcast and looked at David. We know what a real family is. It's not blood ties but connections between people who respect and cherish each other. At that moment, an unexpected development occurred. Paul stood up and moved away from Jessica's side. Step by step, he approached Mary. I don't intend to marry into such a family, he said, staring at Jessica. Jessica turned pale. What are you saying? This is all lies. Mary has always just been jealous. Paul shook his head. I've seen how you talk about your sister these past few months, how much you despise her. And today, you've shown it in public. I don't want to spend my life with someone like that. He approached Mary and stood before her. I respect your courage. Thank you for becoming the voice of many people who have suffered abuse. The venue fell silent again. Jessica began to cry, her perfect makeup starting to smear. Mary took a deep breath, preparing to reveal the final truth. I must speak one more truth about my divorce and infertility. She looked at David, who nodded. I am not a failure. The divorce wasn't because David stopped loving me, but because he couldn't stand up for me. David nodded sadly. I was weak. Seeing Mary's family hurt her, I couldn't protect her, and I ran away from that guilt. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Mary continued. And let me reveal the truth about infertility. She hesitated for a moment but quickly steeled her resolve. According to the doctor's diagnosis, it wasn't me who was infertile, but Jessica, who inherited Dad's DNA. At these words, a murmur arose from the venue. Jessica shuddered, all color draining from her face. Jessica cried out. That's a lie. Mary said quietly. When I had tests done, the doctor said there was no problem with my reproductive ability. But what about you, Jessica? I know you and Paul have been trying to conceive and failing. It's a medical fact, Dad's DNA abnormality is only passed to female children. At this truth bomb, Charles sank into his chair, trembling. His secret, his DNA defect, something he had always hidden, was now public. Jessica stared at her parents. Is this true? Lisa couldn't say anything, just covered her face with her hands. This was a truth she hadn't known either. Mary said quietly. After I got divorced, you forced me to accept the label of being defective. But in reality, the defect was elsewhere. The venue was completely engulfed in silence. Paul moved away from Jessica and headed toward his parents. The Anderson family was preparing to leave together. Mary finally turned the camera toward the viewers and addressed them. The truth can sometimes be painful, but it is the truth that sets us free. Today, I spoke my truth, and by doing so, I have become free. David held her hand. A year later, the Barnes Noble bookstore in New York City was very busy. Many people came to meet Mary at a book signing for her new book, Silent No More. The line was long, with hundreds waiting patiently to see her. Mary had become famous across the country as a helper for people who survived emotional abuse. The Healing Hearts Foundation she started was well known around the world. They ran programs in many places to help survivors. Mary often appeared on TV and gave talks as an expert on emotional abuse. Sitting next to her at the table was David Clark. They were not married again, but they had a strong friendship and understood each other well. Together, they ran Healing Hearts, using their different skills to help the group grow. During a quiet moment, David asked, "Is everything going well?" Mary smiled and said, "Yes, I'm starting a lecture tour next month in California, visiting 12 cities." After the signing, Mary went back to her office, a small, cozy room in a tall building with a view of Central Park. She looked out the window and thought about how much had changed for her family in the last year. That wedding party had started the big changes. Charles's real estate company, Wilson Estates, lost its good name. Many business partners stopped working with him after his bad behavior was shown online. Once strong and confident, Charles now stayed away from people. Lisa stayed away from social events. Friends stopped inviting her. Her perfect image was broken, and she lost her place in society. Jessica's engagement to Paul ended. She left her father's company and moved to a new town. Mary only heard rumors about her and had no direct contact. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. "Mary, someone is here to see you." The door opened, and Jessica stood there. She no longer wore flashy clothes. Instead, she had simple jeans and a sweater. Her face had almost no makeup, and she looked tired. "Can I come in?" Jessica asked quietly. Mary was surprised but nodded and pointed to a chair. "Please." Jessica sat down slowly and folded her hands. "I read your book," she said. "It was wonderful." Mary waited silently for her sister to say more. Jessica took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "I want to say sorry for everything I did to you." Tears shone in her eyes. "I am seeing a counselor now, and I understand I got the same bad treatment from Dad. I hurt you because I was afraid of being hurt myself. I was trying to protect myself by hurting you." Her voice broke. "It was cowardly, wrong, and I can't forgive myself." Mary felt many mixed feelings, pain, anger, and love for her sister. "Healing takes time, Jessica," she said softly. "But it can happen." Jessica looked hopeful. "Really?" Mary nodded. "I don't know if we can trust each other again," she said honestly. "But it's worth trying, especially if you want to face your past." They talked quietly about trying to have a new kind of relationship. It was not full forgiveness yet, but a small first step. A few weeks later, Mary had another book signing for Silent No More. The long line stayed steady as she signed books and talked briefly with each person. By her side was David, her friend and business partner. Not far away, Jessica quietly helped as a volunteer. As Mary signed the next book, she thought about her life's surprising journey. Once seen as a failure, she was now a light of hope for millions. She smiled at the next reader, opened the book, and picked up her pen. Her special words came easily. "Your voice has power. Don't be silent anymore." Mary,